and what a dummy!
Here goes Dan Hagar. Will he go all the way? Oh, Dan puts out Blossom, tipping him over. And done it all the way.
Welcome to the Fantasy Rugby Draft Podcast. Thanks for downloading and listening. I'm Bruce Wilkinson, and joining me again in the booth today is the man primarily made of moss, Nathan Mossman. How are you, mate?
Well, I should be at the Basin Reserve watching day 5 of the Test match, but thanks to some poor shot selection and Brendan's inability to win a toss, here I am.
Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal, that record he's got with the toss. There was something I saw in Eden Park that he's won one toss since 2008 or something really crazy. Something crazy.
That's insane, yeah. And the guy owns racehorses. It's like anything to do with gambling, you think, just he, wouldn't be his thing.
No mirrors in his house, all that type of thing. Yeah, it's the 16th of Feb, and in this podcast, we're just going to take a look at the Podcast League draft that happened on Sunday night. I guess first of all, Mossman, where were you? How did it happen for you?
I was in Wellington, at a pub in Cuba Street. So it was interesting, basically trying to do it on my phone, which did work surprisingly on an Android, and basically trying to flick between the actual draft, some rankings that I had in Google Docs, and all the while trying to down a few beers. So I think actually, all in all, actually turned out all right, considering I had a few things in the air. Yeah,
I'd say that worked out all right. I've got a couple of questions on a couple of your picks, whether they're auto, but we'll get there in a minute. But admin, you can follow us on Twitter at Fantasy Rug Draft, that's Fantasy RUG Draft, or on Facebook. That's where we post a lot of our news and notes and injuries and team selections and the top 5 managers and all that type of thing. Or send us an email at support@fantasyrugbydraft.com. I think we should probably join the Rat Pack as well and shamelessly request a few reviews on SoundCloud and iTunes. If you like the podcast, it's kind of how we get listeners or new listeners, and it's how we get noticed, and it seems that's how other podcasts make a living, so we need to fall in line there. So yeah, good or bad, it'd be great if you could just spend a couple of minutes and put a few stars or whatever you think's apt. And also, while we're at favours, we have a significant obstacle, I guess you'd call it, with junk mail. So a lot of our mails end up in a lot of people's filters and spam filters. Mainly Google actually seems to be the quite harsh on us. I think it's a lot to do with being a new company. It's a lot to do with having the word fantasy in the title. But if each of you out there spend a couple of minutes and just add us as a contact, whether it be the no reply or the support email, just add us as a contact. That's how Google do their remembering. That's how they know that they learn effectively that we're not spam. It would be great. A lot of important emails like trade requests and draft reminders tend to go into spam mail, and we need those going into people's emails. Another quick note around a player that was added we're continually adding players. I think we added about 30 or 40 in the last week. But significantly, the one guy that I think a lot of people seem to be asking about is Marcel Kitsir. So we added him. We received him from our data provider on Saturday, and we added him on Monday. I don't know if you want to diplomatically figure out who in your league gets Marcel Kitsir, or whether it's first in, first served. I know in our podcast league we said no one can have him for week 1, so that he just goes into the waiver wire on the Tuesday after the first game week. So if you think he's worth that waiver, then put him in. I guess the last point in drafts, if you're doing it on a couple of devices, I know we do it every now and again. We've got it on a laptop and got it on a phone. I know, Mossman, you had it in your phone in the pub as well. Sometimes it has a little glitch in every now and again when you're bouncing backwards and forwards. If you see this happening, or if you can't press that draft button when you think you should be able to, just refresh. Just try a quick refresh, just an F5 or whatever's refresh on yours, in your Safari or in your Android. Just press refresh and everything works out fine. Right, let's get into the podcast. I guess let's try and remove as many, if it comes off, it'll look genius, evaluations for the time being, and let's kind of value what we know today. What was your first surprise? I guess let's start about who went number 1 overall, Mossman. Milner Scudder. Thoughts there?
It didn't really come as a huge surprise to me. I think I can understand the reasoning behind it, and I definitely don't have a problem with it. In the same position, I wouldn't have done that. I actually would have gone for Barrett, but I don't think you can go wrong with either guy, to be fair.
That was my next question. So you took Folau at number 2. You had picked number 2. So I was wondering if you were going to take Folau even at 1, but I guess you've just answered it. You would have taken Barrett.
That's right. Yeah, I would have taken him at 1, and then I would have actually gone straight into the outside backs from there.
And I guess that's the point, right? So I guess the Judge 15 who took it, he just valued. I don't have a massive beef as well with fly halves, and I'll get to a few interesting news and a few notes around it, but it might have been smart to take outside back at any position as your first pick, and he just valued Milner Skudder ahead of Folau, Nadolo, Naholo. Not for me, but I can understand why he's done it. So was that your strategy going in, was Beauden Barrett or bust, effectively? So outside back?
Yep, exactly. If I didn't get Barrett, then it was going to be one of those 4 top outside backs who I think are sort of a class above the rest. I definitely wanted to have one of those guys in my team. Yeah, and
I think you probably, in most drafts, you're probably going to have that, because I think Barrett and Sanchez will certainly go in the top 10, but I think the likes of Cruden, Sopoaga, and probably Foley as well fall into that top 10 in most people's drafts. So I think, let's say for example, Foley was available at 10. Would you have gone Foley, or would you have switched across to a midfielder?
I think, well, I mean, this is under the assumption, and I think I said 4 outside backs, I actually mean 5.
Okay.
That this is the assumption that those 5 have gone.
Yes.
Because the 5 I'm thinking of are obviously Nadolo, Folau, Naholo, Savia, and I've forgotten someone.
Milner
Skudder, of course. Yeah. So, if those 5 have gone and I get to that position,
yep.
No, I mean, obviously I'm probably going to stick with Foley in that position.
Okay. And that goes the same for Sopoaga or Cruden, whoever that fly half is that's left over.
Yeah, so I actually had Cruden rolling over into the second round. So
interesting.
I would have taken Sopoaga, Foley, and Sanchez, but then I would have taken Ben Smith and Mike Harris before Cruden.
So did he sleep with your missus in the off season or something? Where's the falling off the wagon? Where's the hatred come from Chiefs fandom?
You think that's hatred though? I mean, it's only 2 spots different from where you had.
I've seen the quilt on your bed, and it's Aaron Cruden montage on it. So I got to assume that you were pumping him last year, but not so much.
I didn't want to put the kiss of death on him, but like last year. But no, just purely from a fantasy draft perspective, that's where I'm at. I think he's in that sort of slightly lower category of fly half, and that's well, actually, you know what? It's not even about that. It's actually just about, I think that the other 2 just have a little bit more value. Fair
enough. Okay. Not really too many other surprises. I guess you'd probably say black and yellow selecting. He obviously wanted to go fly half, so he pulled Foley above Sopoaga and Cruden, which is understandable if you wanted to go that way. He obviously valued getting a fly half. I didn't personally. I was pick 6, and I went Nadolo, and he was my second highest ranked outside back when it came down to it. I had Folau 1. So when I saw that you took him, I was gutted, because I thought 6 was a fairly good opportunity for me to get it, and especially when Milner Skudder went first, I was like, right, I'm screwed now. I'm not going to be able to get Folau. So yeah, I thought that was a fairly good pick from you. No surprises for you though, the rest of the way?
In that first round.
No.
No. In fact, they were, like I said, other than Cruden, they were actually all guys that I had in my top 10 anyway.
Yeah, okay. So let's jump into the second round, where the back end of the second round certainly surprised me with Henry Spate going in that round. Not a choice you would have made?
No. loath to call anybody's pick a mistake, but that's right up there for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is the question I had on you, because you took your time over this one. Were you at the bar and it auto-selected Christian Lealiifano, or was that a calculated selection?
Yeah, no, actually, when I came down to the rankings, I had him coming up anyway. So as it turned out, I was like, well, I'll just let the time run out and he'll just get selected. It was actually easier for me to do that at that point. So
sure.
No, the planets aligned there, so that wasn't a problem.
Oh, okay, good. I wasn't too sure there, because it went right down to the 90 seconds, and as it turns out, I think that probably, looking at the rest of your team, made your team. That balanced it out quite well. And getting Lealiifano at the second to last pick in the second round, I think is fairly good value. That's probably the line I would say is tiers for fly halves. I know we probably talk about Elton Flatley in a minute, but I think that's a pretty good pick there.
I guess the other vote in that second round was we talked about the hype on Reno Ranger. Well, the hype's gone too far. He's going where he's going. That was that's another crazy one for me. But hey,
so you would have taken Moala over him and Feketoa over him?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. As it happened, so I had the 15th pick, 15th overall, and yeah, I did take Moala. I also had an opportunity for Lealiifano, but I wanted to wait on fly half. That was mine going in, and I wanted to grab outside backs and midfielders. So I grabbed Moala at that point. And I guess so the judges' 15 selection, picking Henry Spate, going to the sevens, but the next one I thought was an interesting back-to-back picks were Spate and your second favourite cheese, so Chels and Colby. What do you make of that?
Yeah, well, I'm a Colby fan, but not in the third round. That wouldn't have once again been one of mine. And it's funny that the way that turned out with those two picks, with Spate and Colby going there, is that obviously it opened things up for me on the next pick to take Karevi, and I thought that was interesting because the 1-2 punch for you was Moala and Elton Flatley, and of course it ended up with me and Karevi and Lealiifano, which for me is I'm happy with mine. I mean, if you
Yep, yeah, I agree with that.
I mean, I'm sure I mean, everybody obviously rates their own picks, but just the way that turned out, I think it turned out quite well for me. So, yeah, I don't know how you feel about it.
Well, I think the first point to that is that it's going to be interesting to see how Elton Flatley comes out of retirement and plays. But secondly, Elton Yanchtees will probably go all right for the Lions. But I noticed quite a significant aversion to Lions players, and I'll get onto that in a wee bit. But I don't think that if I had my time again, I wouldn't have picked Elton Yanchtees. Looking at the draft and looking at the scarcity of positions, at the various positions, I think there's a lot of outside backs. I found that I think I picked 3 out of the top 5 were outside backs, and at the end of the draft, there were so many other outside backs that I actually had as my sleepers or things that I wanted to go and have a look at and grab at the last few rounds. But I couldn't do that because I already had a team full of it. So if I had my time there, I noticed that the top tier midfield fell off really quickly. So if I had my time again there, I would probably take in Kurtley Beale, and that's probably the last of that tier, I think, for midfielders, and the rest are the kind of Serfontaines and the likes of those folks that'll be good, could well be really, really good when all said and done. But in terms of studs, yeah, I would have gone for a midfielder again there. Certainly because I think there's a lot of fly halves as well floating around down the line. I don't know what you thought of that.
Well, the first thing is, so Elton Flatley, you actually mentioned him first, and I
just
followed along. Yeah. So you've moved on from Nick Spate, but I'm quite keen on Elton Flatley now. So,
Lord Elton Flatley.
Yeah, exactly, Lord of the Darts. So, yeah, I thought that was interesting too, with the midfielders sort of disappearing early, and I mean, you're probably a bigger fan of Karevi than, or have traditionally been a big fan of Karevi than I have, but yeah, I think I've started drinking some of that Kool-Aid, so I think that's wasn't a bad pick. But yeah, it's there were some interesting ones in there as well.
So Super Seppa went in there as well, didn't he? He
Yep.
went just after you.
Yeah.
Was he on your radar?
Not so much. No. Not that I don't rate him as a player, but I'm just not sure that some of the things from last year are that repeatable. I'm a little bit more cautious, I guess, as much as anything else.
Okay, all right. And yeah, you mentioned Marty McKenzie going in the last pick of the third round. Now, just a quick note on that. Sam's from Methven, one of the greatest places in the world, and I suspect when you trawl through his picks, you could probably sense a slight tinge to his selections, if you will. But yeah, Marty McKenzie there. That's too early for you?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I think so too. I wanted to remove if it turns out it'll work out really well, but yeah, I think you could probably get a bit of value at that.
Well, I think if you look at, say, Ehai West was still on the board at that point, and I think he would have been a better bet.
Mm-hmm. Yep. An interesting one here, though, is our carryover champ, Just Incredibles from last season, picking up Damien McKenzie. Now, speaking to him, it's on the premise that he thinks that D-Mac's going to be the fullback for the Chiefs. We're going to have Scotty Stevenson in to have a chat around the New Zealand squads the next few days anyway. But for you, who is going to be that fullback for the Chiefs, bearing in mind that Tim Nano-Williams is floating around, Sean Stevenson played there for ITM, as well as Damien McKenzie. What are your thoughts?
Yep. Well, the honest answer is I don't know, and because of that, that's why I'm not picking somebody like that in that early in the draft. I mean, it's all about that knowledge that we don't have at the moment, just that uncertainty. That's what you're trying to mitigate. You're trying to reduce the risk, and there's some players in there that aren't particularly risky. They might not be match winners, in the sense that they're going to blow up for 30 points on any given week, but they're going to contribute to your team, and they're going to be playing, which always helps. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I could speculate, but that doesn't help, and it certainly doesn't help you in your draft.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. It's all about minimising risk, right?
Yep.
And it could look genius. I guess depends on the makeup of your team as well. If you've gone for a few solid picks, or if you've got a few proven performers in the back of your mind that you're going to select, then maybe you take a swing at some point. And maybe third round is probably where you can start taking. It's probably a bit early for me. I'm a bit risk averse when it comes to these types of things, but I don't mind seeing it. So back to Lord Elton for a quick one. There are a couple of times in this draft where, and this is something I struggle with, and I think a lot of drafters struggle with, is that when value hits you in the face, even if you don't like him, sometimes the value, you have to take it. You just can't turn it down. And that was one with Elton, but there was a couple also that I chose down the line that I thought, well, that's just crazy value. Even though that I've got enough outside backs, I have to pick him up, and I'll figure out how to, juggle the squad the rest of the time. But middle of the third round for Elton, what do you think?
It's probably about right, I think.
Okay.
I mean, he's right on that. I mean, I'm a fan, I think, from a fantasy point of view, and we've talked about him quite a lot, because I think he was a guy that we talked about, that we liked, that he was sort of included in that tier of fly halves who weren't going to let you down. So could you have waited another round and still got him? Well, I mean, based on the fact that in that next round there weren't any other fly halves, then possibly you could have, but then you're taking a chance, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I, as I said right at the top, I didn't particularly want to go with fly half. I wanted to wait, and the only reason I did that is because I figured it was fairly good value. I really wanted to see if I could get quite a few other positions filled first, but as it turned out, the other players around me at that point, I just wasn't particularly enamoured with, and I'll get onto my Willie LaRue pick in a minute. But back to kind of Kurtley Beale for a second. I did read an article today or yesterday that Phil Hour was quoted in. He obviously didn't go hunting in an earthquake in Christchurch or out back in Christchurch or wherever the Waratahs are at the moment, but he's obviously back at home at the moment, and he stressed his want to play fullback and how much more comfortable he was. And we've talked about this before, how Premiership footballers in the UK, they like to talk to their managers through sound bites in the press by saying, I'll play any position that the coach wants me in, but this is the one I want to play in. You know, comments like that, and I see Folau do it again. He's kind of saying to Gibbo, oh yeah, you can do what you want, you're the coach, but don't do what you want. I want to play fullback. So I wonder how much that's going to affect Beale and potentially put Beale back into that 12 spot and maybe even Rob Horne at 13 and Folau back at fullback. Did you read that article? Did you see that?
No, I didn't, but didn't we have the exact opposite soundbite last year?
It might have been,
at the end of last year.
It
that started this whole rumour about him playing centre.
It might have been.
So now he's obviously changed his mind. It's just a bit of a mess, really, isn't it? But
maybe he's had a chat to Maria Tutaia about how difficult it is to play centre, and she said, no, you need to go back at fullback.
Yeah, well, she should know.
She should know. I guess looking at the fourth round, let's jump into that now. I didn't mind the Yurikura Ioane pick in the fourth. Looking at all the other selections around it, it does seem early, just, without thinking about it, but what's your take there? To me, I thought, there's that tier of three, of him, Artie and Yako. They all came off the board around now, so is that too early for you?
Not really. I think it's okay, and I think what you said is true. If you looked at the players that perhaps were picked up just after that, it kind of makes even more sense. You sort of look at it and think, well, would I have taken him over any of those other guys? Probably, yeah.
Yeah, and that's it. So there's tons of outside backs. Maybe that's the biggest takeaway I took from the draft, and maybe the increase from teams up from 15 up to 18. That there's a lot of outside backs that you can roster. There's certainly obviously a tier, but then there's a lot of really other good ones that you can get in later rounds. Midfielders is thin. Fly halves are there, so maybe it is worth. It's like the tight end in fantasy, right? There's only 2 or 3 of them. Maybe that does bring them forward in drafts. And those 3 are a separation above, for me anyway, for Hooper, is probably the next step down, or Pocock from the next step down. But those guys create their own meters as opposed to sit off the back of a rucker and a maul. I didn't mind Ioane. I guess that one of the points being that the Hooper was taken early. What do you think about that? So Hooper was taken before Adi Savir.
Yeah, and I don't know if that was. I can't explain that one.
No, I can't either. Let me just have a look to see if there's any particular reason. No, that's by Ed, a Canadian entry. No, I can't explain that either. But you took Dane Hale at pity. Obviously, I did. You like the assassin.
I just think at that point in the draft that was good value. He's just another quite consistent player, and another guy that's probably a little bit underrated. Probably because he's not an international, and so doesn't come with that big reputation. But we know from a fantasy point of view that his output is strong. So I think being able to pick him up there as a number 2 outside back as being your fourth choice, I think is pretty handy.
Yeah, don't disagree. I like Dane Alepeti. We have ranked high. I probably would have pulled the trigger on him as well in the next round. And I guess the other point to note in this round is that TJ Paranara came off the board.
That's too rich for my blood as well. We've, like I said, we've talked about him. We don't know if the tries are going to be repeatable. So I'm one that's inclined to sit and wait for a halfback. I'm not putting a lot of value on them this year. I think there's some decent ones out there that you can get for next to nothing.
Yep. No, I agree. I think there is a tier again. I think it's probably Kabili, Reineck and TJ, but again, I'm not going to be one of those guys that takes him. Good luck to you. Last season, if you took it out, you probably looked genius with TJ, but similarly, if you took it out with someone that you thought was going to be like a Nick White or something, not so much. An interesting one, I thought. We had a conversation last podcast, I think it might have been, around the back three for the Blues. You're obviously fairly confident that Vissier is going to be playing a role for the back three. Do you think he's going to be the fullback?
I don't know.
Let's just say your selection is, you picked in the 5th round Vissier.
Yeah. So I'm not too bothered about where he'll play in terms of position. He's played on the wing before there and still been good from a fantasy point of view. He's just got the pedigree in terms of fantasy. And so I think I don't see it as being a gamble. I think he'll still do well.
No, I like Vissier, always have. He's been pretty good up. He went missing last year in a couple of games, but that was more through injury and something to do with John Cohen and where the bodies were buried. Other point, I guess, so, and this is back to the Lions falling again. I'm feeling, maybe it's just me, maybe I'm just a little bit too high on what the Lions are, but so I selected Ruan Combrink in my for my 5th round pick. I liked what they did last season, and him and Mapoe are at the heart of it, and they put up a lot of points. Now, conversely, when they were away from home, they didn't put that too many points, but I might have been swayed a little bit by their pre-season game that they played against nobody, and he scored a couple of tries and did quite well, but I don't see too much of a regression from him. He's a young guy. I think they'll probably still push forward. What did you make, or where did you have Ruan Combrink ranked?
I thought it was a good pick, and I liked him there in that spot too. Probably, as you say, a little bit swayed possibly by some of the articles you read about pre-season. It's easy to get caught up when you see a guy scoring a double and getting a bit of a rap from the journalist. So I actually had him at 40, which I guess is yeah. So he would have gone around about here. So yeah. So no, I don't have a problem with that. But speaking of things I do have a problem with, so Kabeli went in this round. Right. And, it's one thing to go early on a halfback who was the top halfback in fantasy, but to go early on a guy with no pedigree in this league, who doesn't necessarily stand out as somebody who's going to come in and dominate either, just way too early. And I suppose I've probably ranted on occasions before about how I think some of the Jaguars players are being overrated in fantasy, because it's based all on some sort of reputation of vague things that they've done and, appearances you've seen of them, but not over something they've done over an entire season. There's no consistency there. I just think it's far too much risk. And I just even looked at the pick where Kudero went ahead of Goromaru, which I think is crazy. Big fan of Goromaru. I think his floor is going to be really high because of the goal kicking, and by all accounts it looks like this will do. But Cordero's going ahead of James Lowe, and that's nuts in my opinion.
No, I agree now. I've changed my tune on James Lowe. We've ranked him a little bit higher. Now I know you were talking about Kabili in reference to the Argentinian team as opposed to, you're playing for the Brumbies. I know Lendaggio is the halfback there, but the premise still stands that he's got no Super Rugby pedigree, and he's just, it's crazy to be swept up in the whole Argentinian thing. And look, I'm one of the big pushers of the Argentinian, but for me, I probably wouldn't have picked Kabili at the Brumbies. I'm not sure if he's going to be that same type of player that we see for the Argentinian team. But we have seen good things again in the pre-season. I think it's a bit early for me. There's a lot of other players I would have picked ahead of him. Moving on to a pick that, again, Dylan made in... Was it this round or was it the 5th round? When did Sonny Bill go? That's what I wanted to talk about anyway.
He was in the round before this, actually.
Was he? Okay, so...
Yeah.
So what do you make on that? Because all we hear in this country is about how he's going to sevens and he's trying to get the gold. But when you actually break it down, and we've talked about the games that the players want to miss, could that be quite a good pick? And is it going to be him and Charlie Nata in the midfield?
I think it will be.
Okay.
There doesn't seem to be a reason to not think that. We've removed a little bit of the uncertainty around the sevens thing. I think we've got some clarity, which is good. So we know what Sonny Bill can do. So yeah, maybe he's dropped a little bit too far in our estimations. I know that we were sort of talking about staying clear of him, but there's some real potential there for him to be a match winner and could be a steal if you can get him as late as that.
I tell you what though, if you're a Sonny Bill owner, you better be monitoring the news reports coming out at about 5 minutes to 7 o'clock on a Friday night, because he gets pulled and he's bracketed a lot of games. He seems to be one of those players that maybe Rennie's figured out that he's such an X factor that even if he's unlikely to play, put him in the starting lineup because it kind of sways a team's defence one way or t'other. But certainly I had him last season and I just gave up. I had to trade him away. It was too much like hard work, and especially in games on a Saturday where you can't do anything about it, and he gets pulled, it just hurts you too much. One of our sleepers, or maybe one of my sleepers, is Warwick Gillant. He went pretty early. Too early for you?
No, I don't know. I mean, I guess there are probably other players around him that I might have gone for first, but there's a lot of potential there, for sure. But that's not sleeper range though that he's going in.
No, that's right.
and I guess that's the problem. Yeah.
We were tweeting that. We were live tweeting the draft, and it was quite amusing. That was the comment that we put in for Warwick Gillant, is that isn't a sleeper, right? So he is a sleeper no more, getting drafted in the 4th round. That's very, very high. I wanted to have a quick chat about my selection in that point. I couldn't turn it down. I'm not particularly... I'm not at the front of the wagon for the Willie LaRue pain train going at the Sharks. I know you probably have a different view than me, but so you selected Dane Haylett-Petty there. You had Willie LaRue ahead of him?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, look, I got a few pats on the back after speaking to a few folks about Willie LaRue, but maybe I was bitten. I didn't actually own Willie LaRue last season, but it was just such a poor output last season that I got very, very nervous. But again, it was just a value at that pick, middle of the 4th round. Couldn't turn it down.
Yep, and I think that's totally fair. I guess perhaps as a Willie LaRue owner of last season, I might have been just a bit shy about going there again. But it was partly that, but I just think Haylett-Petty, I think, maybe a bit more consistent. Yeah,
I agree. I think I don't know best. No, I got to admit, I was swayed by your argument, and also Brendan was looking forward to seeing how he'd go in a much more solid team. So yeah, no, I guess we'll wait and see. Hurricanes front row. No surprises that it was the first off the rank, I guess, but this early.
Yeah, no, once again, not for me.
Sure.
But, yeah, it's strange though, because having looked at where it's gone and in fact, the team that took this, managed to actually compile some of the top players in some of these positions. Mm-hmm. So that could actually turn out to be, like a really smart move. And of course, the other thing about the front row, they don't get injured.
Yeah, that's right.
There'll always be something from them. You're not going to be, having to replace them. I mean, obviously, Dane Coles is massively important to them. Mm-hmm. But, at the end of the day, it's, Reg Goods, he will get points as well. Got a lot of turnovers, basically playing like a loose forward. So, yep. It's less risky in some ways, say, than picking the top halfback. Yep. For instance, who could go and get injured tomorrow, and then it's all over, So, not a stupid move, I don't think.
No, I don't think so. There's some interesting selections in this. in this round, so Ryan Crotty, the Fish, Glenn Fascioli, and I guess Juan de Jong as well. So Judges 15 is obviously compiling a sevens team. But aside from that, you picked Damien Delende. You're obviously not nervous about missing a few weeks at the start of the season?
No, I am, but I just thought at this point when I looked at some of the players, so for instance, you picked up Joe Tamani. Now, I if he was still there, I probably would have done that. Owned him last season. We know from the analysis at the end of last year that he was a guy that was on most of, a very high percentage of the championship winning teams. And I think to be able to pick him up in the sixth round was a really good pick. But it falls off, pretty quickly after that. Juan de Jong, for instance, who was the guy immediately after that Damien Delende pick, he's just another midfield guy. He's going to pick you up, a handful of points. He's almost replacement level. You'll find someone else that'll do a very similar job. Whereas Damien Delende, I think it's worth a gamble at this point.
Yep, I didn't mind the pick at all. I liked it. I thought that they could end up paying off in spades, and you have Samu Karevi and Damien Delende in there, and Jesus, you might not need too many other players, right?
It's not bad.
Yeah, exactly. I guess it's at this point we should probably point out that Coochie Town was the only auto drafter in our league, and the reason for that is that he was spending Valentine's Day in Rome, watching England turn over Italy. He's in Valentine's Day with his missus, I might add. Lucky man. So that was why he's on auto pick, and he picked up the likes of Nanai Williams and Pat Lambie was why I referenced this now, because that he may accidentally fall into something pretty good there in the sixth round, or the sixth round. So
no, it would explain a lot. Wasn't particularly enamoured with his team.
No. I believe he's been the subject of a few trade inquiries, shall we say. So I picked up the Jaguars front row in the next. So the next round I picked up Johnny McNichol. I thought that was fairly good value, and you went for your first loose forward at that point at Matt Todd as well. What are your thoughts on what is your process around that?
Well, I just think I needed somebody in that position. I actually do think Matt Todd will go pretty well this year. Obviously, doesn't have Sir Richie to contend with. I think he'll be the guy on the back of them all. And, I think he's in a position to be like a really solid loose forward. Obviously he's not going to be Adi Savia. He's not going to be Ioane. But I just thought when I looked at some of the guys that were still left in the loose forwards, I just thought that he was close enough to those top guys that now is the time to go.
Yeah, so I think there's two tiers. I think there's him, there's those three that we've talked about, and then there's your Hooper, Pocock, Vito, Todd, those Tuafua and Carr is probably the tier that I'd have it in. And maybe I put Sam Kane in there, I don't know. And then the rest, they kind of all can have great weeks or not great weeks. So if I didn't get any of those guys, I was moving away from them at all. And it took me a long, and actually Boom Prinsloo is probably someone I put in that list as well. But,
sure.
But I waited a long time for loose forward, and I actually not even too sure who I got in the end. I'll have to check at the end of the thing, but it was certainly, I think I got Liam Squire quite late. Someone like that, but I think there's that tier, and you obviously felt that Todd wasn't coming back to you at any point, and I think it's a decent pick. Just Incredibles went for Rob Thompson. I quite like that pick. It's a bit of a risky one, but again, looking at folks that are around, I think back to what I said at the top. There's so many outside backs, not many. All the midfielders you want are already gone. There's fly halves you've probably taken at this point. Why not take someone like that? How far through how many rounds do you reckon we should go through, Mossman? Because there's quite a few here. Or maybe I should make a point that the next round I grabbed Richie Mo'unga just to try to screw over Sam in Combe and see what happens. But any other picks that you wanted to kind of have a chat about or talk through?
Well, I thought Dom Shipley went really late, and he's someone that and Johnny McNichol, both in that round, which I thought was were both kind of interesting. Going behind Matt Duffy, which is, interesting because they've kind of proven commodities and Matt Duffy isn't. I guess at that round, perhaps you're thinking I'll throw the dice and it's not a big deal. I'm not sure if the news about Matt Proctor had come out before I picked him up.
No,
That's right. So I can consider myself unlucky rather than incompetent.
No, it was unlucky. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure our chat board, which was pretty damn full anyway, would have been just all over it.
Good point. Yeah.
I think one other for me, and I said it at the time, I said it previously as well. Lionel Mapo going as late as he did kind of illustrated my point that there are a lot of outside backs, and I think I picked up Aiden Taua as my second to last pick. Now, whether or not he gets Robbie Coleman's job at fullback for the Brumbies or not, it's one or the other, and both of them are available at the round that I picked them up, which is very, very late, probably in the last 2 or 3 rounds. Which just kind of illustrated to me that there's a really small tier of midfielders and there's a small tier of loose forwards. So potentially you want to keep that. You just want to keep that in your kind of locker when you're going into your draft. Any other kind of general theme around the draft that you wanted to pick up?
I think just generally, I think when we touched on it earlier, I'm staying away from halfbacks. I'm not going to draft a halfback until somewhere near the end. Because I think there's plenty good ones out there. Someone like Tawera Kurbala, for instance, who obviously was out for a lot of last season, won't probably be high on people's radar. If you can get him late, I think it's great. But even if you can't, don't worry about it. Like the midfield and the loose forwards, there's proven commodities there that I think you can kind of guarantee. And I think if you look at the number of points that they score per game, they're going to be more valuable than your halfback anyway. So, I think that as a strategy, I would leave halfback until quite late.
Yep. No, I agree. And I was having a chat to Justin Pivus, friend of the podcast, and he's actually got his draft coming up as well this Saturday, and he's got the number 6 pick, ironically as well, which is the same as me. So he was watching on with interests, and we've had plenty of chats around what actually might be the best strategy, and it may well be outside back, midfield, and then loose forward, and then getting fly half late, because of those tiers in the midfield and in the loose forwards. Don't know. It's an interesting one. I guess it varies a little bit on what position you have as well.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I want to have one of the big 5 outside backs if I can on my team.
I do. And I'm almost doing that. I probably wouldn't have taken... Well, actually, I'm trying to think. I'm sure it's going to happen to me again this season where I get 1 and 2. And I'm probably going to take Bowden Barrett and Sanchez, and in that point, I'm probably not going to get those top 5 because I'm not going to get a pick until 18, 19, 20. So it's going to be really interesting to see. But I guess one last thing in the last round I thought was interesting is that Tusi Pisi went in the last round, and you picked up Havili as well, which I thought was a pretty good bet. But it looks like Pisi was kicking the goals for the Sunwolves against the B team or whatever that top league team that they were playing, but it wasn't actually Viljoen. He scored 2 tries, I might add, Viljoen, but PC was running the field and looked pretty good as well, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, he did get man of the match, and I know that Rich had picked out Viljoen as the goal kicker, but I thought that was an interesting one because when you went back and looked at the stats coming out of the top league, he actually hadn't kicked much at all during that season. So sure. I think that PC is probably still the option. Yeah, so okay. Could be interesting.
Yeah, I just think it's great value, and just kind of illustrates my point as well, as you can wait till then. And I think John O'Lance went two rounds before him, and Peter Grant, I think, might have even gone undrafted. I'm just having a look on our waiver wire now and looking at free agency, and yeah, it seems that way. Okay, so that's probably round by round a good kind of playback. Who do you think had the best team? Based on value right now is what we know, not if it blows up this will happen, but who do you think had the best team? And you can include yourself in this.
I'm pretty happy with how it went. But if I was picking out other teams, I thought Bucks Lost Nut actually was a reasonable team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think when you've got someone like Corey Jane as your number 3 outside back, and you're reasonably strong in other positions, I think that's kind of handy. The other thing and I also thought that, I think sort of mentioned it earlier, that the underdags, having sort of cornered the market in top players in certain positions, and I'm thinking of, so the Artie Xavier, Jaco Creel and the Hurricanes front row all together. I mean, that's a handy kind of baseline of teams, in positions where we probably wouldn't normally think about it. That's quite interesting, I think.
He's paid for it though, hasn't he? Like, if you look at his outside backs,
outside back,
they're going to have to come off. So Osborne, good pick, but Montero, Duffy, Guildford, Nabuli, Lamape. So you're going to have to get 2 out of those to kind of really carry you through the season. But it's your point. He's got Sanchez, he's got Xavier, he's got Jaco, and he's got the Hurricanes front row. That'll take you a while, in tower, I guess.
And the thing is that outside backs, kind of by nature, that they can be a little bit hit and miss. So, but if generally loose forwards are going to be quite low scoring, so it could be that he just needs a week where one of his outside backs, one of the unfancied ones, actually does something, and that could be enough.
Yep, agreed. So, if you had your time again looking at your team, would you change anything? Did you think?
I would have changed the Proctor thing, obviously. But
sure.
There wasn't much I could have done about that. Not particularly, no. Just looking through.
No, look, I think it's a fairly solid team. Yeah.
Yeah, I might have had second thoughts about Visanier. Perhaps there was a little bit too much uncertainty. The other thing that was interesting was that I remember Reg talking about, and I couldn't remember if it was Aiden Tua or Ben Tapawai, as being somebody to watch, because, he obviously was a player that, had played before and perhaps hadn't been fantastic, but came with this big reputation from schoolboy rugby and had done all these things in the past, and he was sort of touting him, and I couldn't remember who it was, and I think I ended up with Tapawai, and it may have been Tua.
I think it might have been Aiden Tua, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
He's a big fan of him, got lightning pace, but he is also a fan of Benny Taps, I believe is his name. A big fan of his as well, so I guess we'll see. I was left quite barren in loose forwards. Fairly happy with the rest of my team. I guess if the Lions play well, then I'll essentially go quite well, I think. One last point is that I couldn't avoid getting Seta Tamanavulu in my team again.
Going back to the well.
Just for old time's sake. It's like those folks that play American football fantasy that drop their reserve kicker in the playoffs and just pick up Tim Tebow. Just for karma. Just for the good luck gods. And,
and I think for those people that haven't listened to some of the earlier podcasts with, some of the regional experts, so I just mentioned Reg. So, I mean, I just went with what he had said about, I think Ita Vea, he'd picked out that he was the NRC Player of the Year last year, which I'm sure a lot of people listening, including myself, didn't know.
Yep.
So when I saw him there in the last couple of rounds of the draft, I jumped all over it, and that's all due to his recommendation. So
No, that's a good selection. I like that. All right. Anything more before we duck off?
No, I mean it's obviously, I don't know about you, but it was my first draft of the year, so it is interesting to see how it panned out, but it's also going to be interesting to see how thinking evolves maybe over the next few weeks as well.
Oh, absolutely. The best laid plans crumble when it hits the enemy line, the first time it hits the enemy line. Right. What was the old Mike Tyson saying? Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. Yeah, that's right. And it certainly felt like that. For us, we were live tweeting at the same time, trying to draft and trying to respond to a bit of stuff on social. It was a hot night in Auckland. It certainly had the pressure on. It was a hell of a lot of fun though, and it's great when you have a big bunch of lads or a big bunch of folks on, all in the online draft and all chatting away and all got the theories. It was a hell of a lot of fun, and that's what we love to see. All right, it's about as much we have time for today. You can follow us on Twitter at Fantasy Rug Draft, that's Fantasy OG Draft, or drop us a mail on support@fantasyrugbydraft.com. The next podcast we'll have Scotty Stevenson on to chat about the New Zealand squads, to see what he think of some players that we'll throw at him. But thanks for downloading and listening. I'm Bruce Wilkinson, he's Nathan Mossman.
No ball.
Out to your Rapido.
What a bust here by Christian Cullen. Plenty of support, and what a